Hi there, I'm Becky Hammond and welcome to Isogo TV. Wherever you are on your strengths journey, I want to help you take your greatest strengths and apply them to your everyday work and your everyday life. For more energy, decreased frustration at work and at home. You know, when's the last time you heard someone ask you about your strengths and your weaknesses? And maybe you made a list and you said, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. And what we tend to do is we tend to look at our strengths and give them a little nod like, thanks for being here. We turn around and we put them on the shelf next to us. And then we turn our attention back towards our weaknesses. And we pick a couple and we work on them. We set up a plan. And we say, okay, if I can just get even a little bit better in these two areas, then that's when I'm going to grow. That's when I'm going to be more successful. A better leader, a better manager, a better worker, a better spouse, a better parent. And today, we're going to look that issue of weakness right in the eyes. We're going to say, well, it's not something that has to be whispered in this world of talking about strengths, because we all certainly have things that are weaknesses to us. But that is something that can turn the conventional wisdom on its head. That we can say, we can neutralize our weaknesses while boosting our energy by utilizing our strengths to get there. So today, on episode 43, we are going to talk about neutralizing our weaknesses while boosting our energy through 4 actionable strategies. And today, this is going to be part 1 of a 2-part series where we talk about those first 2 strategies for neutralizing your weaknesses. And those first 2 strategies all start with you and your strengths. So let's dive in. I really love Gallup's definition of weakness. I really used to think of weakness as something that you're not good at. But they define it as the use of a talent or a non-talent that negatively impacts the productivity of yourself or of somebody else. And I've shortened that to say a weakness is something that gets in the way of what you want to accomplish or what other people are trying to accomplish. And so sometimes it's not only something that you're not good at, it actually could be something, a weakness could be something that you actually are very good at. So for example, I have belief in my top 5 strengths. And I have found that sometimes I can really dig in my heels. When there's something that I am very passionate about and believe strongly in, I can dig in my heels to the point where I'm not really using that as a strength, but I'm using that talent, something that I'm very good at, as a weakness. I mean, in fact, I almost destroyed a relationship over it when I was talking about a potential partnership with a friend, because what she was communicating and what I was communicating were so different from each other that I felt like that belief was being violated, and I maxed out that belief and used it in a way that wasn't productive for our conversation. And just to be clear, we talked a lot about this in episode 32. Just because it is your weakness doesn't give you an excuse not to do something about it. You know, sometimes you have to have certain outcomes in order to get to a place of success. So for example, just because I have ideation as number 34 doesn't mean that I can run my business without coming up with any new ideas. I absolutely would fail if I didn't come up with new ideas. So I can't allow that weakness to get in my way. I have to figure out some way to neutralize that weakness, to get around it so that I can continue to use my strengths to get to a place of success. And so there are 4 strategies that I want to share with you over this episode and the next episode that really I think are the most effective strategies to neutralize your weaknesses while still boosting your energy. It doesn't have to be draining to neutralize the effect and mitigate for those weaknesses that we all have. So the 4 different ways that I have discovered to neutralize your weaknesses while boosting your energy are to intentionally use your strengths, to control the volume of your strengths, to implement a system or a tool, and to build a complementary partnership. And you can use one or all of these things in conjunction to neutralize your weaknesses while boosting your energy. So I want to talk about those first two today. And that really, the emphasis is on you. Things that you can do with your own strengths to neutralize those weaknesses. And the first one is to intentionally use your strengths. And this is, this might feel obvious, but one of the people that I was working with when I worked with a group kind of answered the same type of question in a visual way that I loved. And it really goes back to that star that we have. That as we grow our star and the sharpest points about us, every part of us is growing. And so I wanted to show you what he drew out and what I have, what for me has then stuck in my mind as a picture of how we can neutralize our weaknesses as we're growing our own stars. So if you've been following along at all, you know that I really visualize our strengths as a star, where our sharpest points are our talents. Those are the things that we grow to be more successful, to have more energy, to decrease our frustration. And where the weakness part comes in, where it comes into this strategy, being able to intentionally use and develop our strengths is going to help neutralize our weaknesses, is when you start to realize that as you grow these points, your entire star grows with it. And so now, where you used to have your weakness or your dip right here, as you grow in self-awareness and maturity and you sharpen those strengths out at the corner, your weakness, the talents that are lesser for you, might also expand as you are working on developing your strengths, intentionally developing your strengths. So for example, there's a manager that I was working with who was really frustrated that there were all these achievers around him and that was the value that seemed like was coming, that was the number one value. And he had no desire to kind of have that strength, but he realized he needed to figure out how to step up his game in getting things done. And over time, really over a couple years, he realized that as he developed and sharpened his arranger strength, that helped him to keep up and to develop this strength of being able to get things done. So that even though he doesn't have achiever, let's say this achiever was his in the dip, but he had arranger, as he developed this arranger, the attributes of getting things done that are associated with achiever grew as well. So that's the first strategy. The second strategy has to do with volume control. And we talked extensively about this, where we talked about the most effective way to increase energy and reduce frustration. That we have control over how loud or how soft the volume of our strengths are. And you can go back and look at that episode. I'll put the link in the show notes as well to get more details and even pick up the free resource there as well that helps you walk through. What do you mean? How do I control the volume of my strengths? And there's one example that I can give from a client of mine who we were in a workshop together and we were walking through this exercise of saying, okay, where do I use my strengths well in a like optimal volume? Where maybe do I have my strengths too high a volume? Where do I have them too low? And what she realized is she was new to a team and she was seen as not contributing, not being somebody who really jumped right in and got on board. But she had this activator strength. And what she realized is that she was using this activator strength in other parts of her life, but she didn't really have it dialed in appropriately for her work life. And that when she realized that she could intentionally turn up the volume on that activator strength, she would be seen as a more valuable contributor. So it was a huge aha moment for her that she said, I can mitigate for this weakness, neutralize this weakness of being seen as not contributing by turning up the volume on my activator strength. So those are the two strategies that I'm going to leave you with today to start to mull over to say, okay, how do I neutralize those weaknesses while boosting my energy, Well, it's by concentrating on you and what you're already wired with. That as you concentrate on your strengths, developing them intentionally and controlling the volume of your strengths, you'll begin to neutralize your weaknesses while boosting your energy. So let's use this. This is going to be an exercise in weakness that's going to be way more fun than thinking about your weakness has ever been. Step 1 is to identify what those weaknesses are. What has been getting in the way of your own productivity or the productivity of someone else? And this can take some thought, so take a couple minutes and really think about that. And then step 2 is applying one of the 2 strategies that we talked about today. Maybe you need to sharpen your star. Intentionally develop the talents that you are naturally wired with. Or maybe you need to think about controlling the volume of your strengths. Is there a strength that you are under or overusing that really is creating that area of weakness for you? And there was a resource that we used in episode 31 where we talked in depth about this idea of volume control. And I'm going to make sure it's available for you as well in association with this episode, so you can head over to isogostrong.com in association with this episode, and I'll make sure that it's there in the show notes for you as well as a free download. And then in the meantime, you can be working on this so that next week during part 2, you'll come equipped to think about what are some other ways, other strategies that go beyond you that we can use to neutralize our weaknesses and boost our energy. So please, if you are love what you've been hearing here on Isogo TV, I would love for you to rate, review, and share Isogo TV, this video podcast, over at iTunes. You can head over there to do that, or share in your social media networks and just with the people that are sitting next to you. Because I want all of us to experience the increased energy and the decreased frustration that we can have by living fully out of our strengths, out of this strength paradigm. So thanks for joining me here today, and I look forward to having you come along with me next week on Isogo TV.